Hi, this is TJR, and last night on the 8th of March, George Martin, one of the most important music producers in the history of popular music, passed away. He was 90 years old. And of course, George Martin is best known for his work with the Beatles. He certainly had a career prior to the Beatles, and I had the privilege to be able to sit in a small theater and with a very intimate audience and be able to actually listen to George Martin speak about his career and his work with the Beatles. And it was an amazing night with an incredibly diverse crowd. Um, um, he produced almost the entirety of the Beatles catalog, the only exception being, of course, Let It Be. And that evening, when he talked about his work with the Beatles, he said that had he known that every other label in England had turned them down, that he probably wouldn't have given them a chance himself. And when it was time to record their first single, he wanted them to do a cover, but the Beatles really wanted to do Love Me Do, which is one of their original songs, and their first single, their first record. And to his credit, he actually let them record their own original song, which in that day and age was a very risky thing to do. Most producers, music producers, would have not allowed a new act to do that because recording a cover was a lot safer and guaranteed more sales. And he also talked about how when the Beatles first presented him with the song Please Please Me, which was the title track from their first album, and one of my personal favorites from their early period, the Mop Top years. He had told them he didn't think it was a very good song. He described the song as being too slow, a bit of a dirge, and told them, but if you speed it up a little bit and put a little muscle behind it, it might be a pretty good song. And he made the right call with that. And, you know, it makes me wonder sometimes what might have happened to the Beatles had it not been George Martin, had it been a different music producer, had someone else signed them. And who knows what might have happened because, you know, he let them do their original song when that went against the grain of doing that. And he was a classically trained and formally educated musician. The Beatles were not. And now you might have thought, and I think, you know, without the benefit of hindsight, one would think that this would not work. This would have led to conflict. This would have led to trouble. But in an interview, Paul McCartney stated that George Martin's formal classical training and their lack of any formal classical training just fit really nicely together. They complemented each other extremely well. 3, 2, 1. Three, two, one. As an example, when Paul McCartney composed Penny Lane and played it for George Martin, he said, "Now during the instrumental break, I want to hear an instrument here," and he didn't know the name of the instrument, but he said he described it for him, and it sounds like this and it looks like this, and Sir George Martin said, "Oh yeah, that's the French horn that you want to hear." "Oh, great, that's what I want to hear then." And, you know, George Martin, of course, he went out and hired the French horn player that played on the session, but he also wrote down the arrangement for the French horn player. He composed that solo. He composed that part, notated it down on paper so that classically trained musician could play could play that part. Because classically trained musicians weren't in the habit of just improvise a solo. It's not like when you ask Eric Clapton to come into the studio and just, hey, lay something down. Just, you know, see what you come up with. And he's just going to come up with something off the top of his head. That's what he does. You know, most classically trained musicians, especially from that era, they're not going to improvise anything. They're going to say, well, what do you want me to play? Put it in front of me here. Put it on paper. So he would notate that down, compose it, notate it down. Here you go. And that's what would happen. Eleanor Rigby, same thing. I'm not sure whose idea it was that the Beatles would not actually play any instruments on record, on that song, that they would just simply sing and that the instrumentation would be handled by a string quartet. Don't know if it was both their ideas, if it was just the band's ideas, if it was his idea first. But at any rate, it was the right idea. And once again, Sir George Martin wrote the arrangement for that string quartet and, put that together. And, I Am the Walrus, primarily a John Lennon song. Once again, the string section you hear, that's George Martin. He composed that part. He put that together. And this is why I feel that he is the fifth Beatle, just my opinion. And when the Beatles wanted to explore with different musical textures, he was the musical bridge. He helped communicate to the more formally educated musicians that were brought in to play on those sessions, and he helped them realize their musical ideas that they heard in their heads and helped them get it onto tape. And he helped them to experiment. And so once again, you have to wonder, what would have happened had someone else signed them? What would have happened had it been a different music producer? How might the Beatles have turned out? I'm not saying that George Martin was solely responsible. No, the Beatles themselves, their brilliance is amazing. Their songwriting is nothing short of amazing. But there's his contribution too. There's George Martin's contribution. And what might have happened had he not been there? It's an interesting thing to think about. A lot of music critics are dismissive of the Yellow Submarine album. The reason being that side one only features 4 new original Beatles songs and then 2 other songs that were already previously released. And then side 2 features highlights from George Martin's orchestral score for the motion picture. And, for a while there, I kind of went along with that. And then one day I said, wait a minute, this is the guy who composed the string quartet for Eleanor Rigby. This is the guy who composed, the French horn solo for Penny Lane, among others. And I thought, wait a minute, maybe I better give this a closer look. And I listened to, side 2 a lot more closely, and it really recognized for the first time its beauty and its elegance. And, they did later release a version of Yellow Submarine that features all the actual Beatles songs that were featured in the movie, and along with the 4 original tracks, but all the other previously released songs that were featured in the movie. And I think it's high time that we get an album that is the full orchestral score composed by George Martin for the Yellow Submarine movie as well. I think it's high time that gets recognized. George Martin really set the bar high for the title of music producer. Music producer's job, it's varied. Different music producers do different things. But he really set the bar high. And it's a bar that only a very few have really met, in my opinion. And anyways, though, just wanted to share my thoughts about this. And it's a sad day for music. We've lost a very talented individual. And I would love to hear your thoughts on this as well. And anyways, though, but that's about it, though. And this is TJR. Thank you so much for watching. Looking forward to reading your thoughts and comments. Take care. Bye-bye.